Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me at the Free From Allergy show and listening to my presentation today on eating out with celiac disease. My name is Jessica Milliner and I am an expert celiac and gut health dietitian. I am an accredited practicing dietitian with over 10 years of experience. I also have celiac disease and have been living with the condition for the last 14 years or so. I'm also a mum of 3 kids, a wife, a business owner, and a lover of food, exercise, and nature. When it comes to having celiac disease, eating out would have to be one of the biggest challenges most people with the condition have. Now, I'm not just talking about eating at restaurants and cafes. I'm talking about anywhere outside the comfort of your own safely controlled celiac-safe kitchen. So this includes eating at friends and family's houses, at events such as weddings, birthday parties, music festivals, going to the markets, or even when traveling on a plane or a boat or a train or a bus. Anywhere, really. So are you even contemplating eating out yet? Are you ready? The first thing we need to think about is your eating out mindset. If you're newly diagnosed, this may not be the first thing you're about to thinking about, as there is so much to learn. Rather, you may be mourning the life you once had, where you could spontaneously eat out anywhere. You might feel sad, scared, overwhelmed, but a little hopeful that as time goes on, your knowledge will increase and you will be able to eat out again. For others with celiac disease, you've become familiar with your level of sensitivity to gluten and are not even willing to take the risk. You may be too worried about the risk of cross contact, as you know your symptoms are so problematic, it's just not worth it. You've decided to really limit your eating out experiences as much as possible and eat predominantly from the food you have prepared in your own kitchen. Despite having a sense of control on your gluten-free diet, you really wish you could socialize more and are missing this important component of your life. In fact, your quality of life may feel somewhat reduced because you are so hypervigilant when it comes to managing your celiac disease. Research has actually shown that people with celiac disease who are extremely hypervigilant have a reduced quality of life, and that the effect on their mental health may override the potential health risk of eating out. Or perhaps you've had celiac disease for a while, but still have anxiety around the gluten-free diet and eating out as you struggle to understand what really is celiac safe. However, with a bit more knowledge, you might be keen to balance a little bit of risk with a little bit of food enjoyment, socialization, and culture. So where do you think you sit? There is no wrong or right, as everyone's journey with celiac disease is unique. As an expert celiac dietitian, I'm here to empower you to feel confident in making celiac-safe choices that will ultimately make you feel happy and healthy in living with your condition. So when it comes to eating out, your decision really comes down to 3 factors. 1, your own personal level of risk you're willing to take. 2, your knowledge about the gluten-free diet and celiac safety. And 3, the trust you have in someone to prepare your food in a celiac-safe way. So my presentation is all about providing you with the facts on how much gluten is safe, the latest research findings on the real risk of cross-contamination, and the skills you need to master eating out without worry, aka gluten-free knowledge and communication. Remember, any action starts with our mindset, so let's dive a little deeper into the areas that really influence our mindset, our knowledge. So how much gluten is safe? Will a single crumb cause gut damage? The visual image of gluten-containing crumbs accidentally landing on our gluten-free meal while eating out is enough to stop many of us from leaving our own home. While it is certainly important to minimize our risk of this happening, it is also important to recognize how much gluten is considered safe and the real risk of gluten actually being transferred onto your gluten-free meal. An Italian study by Catasi in 2007 has largely informed global food legislation on this. So the current international safe allowance of gluten is 10 milligrams a day. However, there are limited studies that have examined safe thresholds of gluten for those with celiac disease. So this study that I referred to found that 50 milligrams of gluten per day, if introduced for 3 months, was sufficient to cause significant damage to the architecture of the small intestine in patients being treated for celiac disease. However, most who consume 10 milligrams per day seem to be okay, though not all were, as there was a large variability in sensitivity to trace intake of gluten. Despite the international safe allowance, gluten-free standards differ in different countries. So in the US, Canada, and Europe, less than 20 parts per million of gluten are allowed, which is equivalent of 20 milligrams per kilogram of food, and gluten-free oats are also allowed. In Argentina, less than 10 parts per million of gluten are allowed in foods and no oats. And in Australia, New Zealand, and Chile, no detectable gluten is allowed, which is equivalent of less than 3 parts per million. And there are also no oats allowed as well. So what does this actually look like in terms of crumbs? Well, 10 milligrams of gluten, or 20 parts per million, the current international safe limit, is about 1/250th of a slice of wheat bread, which equates to around 6 to 10 crumbs. To date, the research tells us that a single crumb will not cause gut damage, yet individuals may still be sensitive to 10 crumbs or less. Currently in Australia, a research project is being undertaken by James Davison and his team at the Wesley Institute called the Gluten Threshold Study to address the knowledge gap in the safe gluten threshold. So I'm not going to go into the details of this now, but please contact me if you'd like more info and watch this space for the results. So the take-home message when it comes to how much gluten is safe when eating out. Consider your personal level of sensitivity before deciding to eat out. There is a different level of response by the immune system to gluten amongst those with celiac disease. Not all of us have the same degree of inflammation post-gluten exposure. Much the same way, we experience different degrees of symptomatic response. Therefore, taking into account your own personal level of risk should definitely come into play when assessing your readiness to eat out. Some may be more prepared to take a little risk more often than others. And of course, remembering that a single crumb will not cause gut damage. But what is the real risk of cross-contamination and consuming more than a few crumbs? Well, there are conflicting recommendations regarding the need for a dedicated gluten-free kitchen, utensils, and cooking equipment. So let's look at the evidence when it comes to assessing your real risk of cross-contamination to help you decide if it really is safe to eat out. So first of all, let's look at the gluten transfer when gluten-free foods are prepared alongside gluten-containing foods. Well, a study by Weisbrod qualified gluten transfer when gluten-free foods were prepared alongside gluten-containing foods and also assessed the efficacy of cleaning methods. In particular, it looked at a gluten-free pasta cooked in water used to cook wheat-based pasta, toasting gluten-free bread in a shared toaster, and cutting a gluten-free cupcake with a shared knife. It showed that gluten was detected in all pasta samples cooked in the water used for gluten-containing pasta. However, rinsing the pasta under the running tap water reduced gluten content to less than 20 parts per million. Rinsing the pots with water alone after gluten-containing pasta was as effective as scrubbing with soap and water to prevent detectable gluten transfer. So pretty interesting findings there. There was no gluten transfer above 20 parts per million in a shared toaster, even with gluten crumbs visible. Again, really interesting because there's a lot of hypervigilance, particularly around toasters. But gluten was detected on 28 of the 30 cupcakes that had used a shared knife. However, only 2 of the 28 cupcakes tested had gluten over 20 parts per million. All 3 knife washing methods, so there was soap, water, rinse in running water, and antibacterial hand wipes, were all effective in removing gluten. Therefore, some kitchen activities may pose less of a risk of cross-contact with gluten than is commonly believed. Cross-contact will inevitably vary in different kitchen environments. Therefore, it is important for celiac disease patients to ask questions about methods used to prepare gluten-free food. Okay, so another hot topic amongst us with celiac disease is the use of wooden cutting boards and other wooden kitchen utensils, with their porous nature possibly allowing gluten to be retained in the utensil. So another study by Suderis et al. In 2018 determined whether cross-contamination occurs through shared domestic kitchenware, and if so, which cleaning method was most reliable for avoiding cross-contact. So the kitchenware tested was a wooden spoon, a colander, ladle, and knife that was previously used to cook and or prepare gluten-containing foods, then thoroughly washed before using to prepare gluten-free foods. So contrary to our expectations, gluten was not detected in relevant and quantifiable amounts in the samples. So using shared utensils is absolutely fine as long as they're washed in between. So a more obvious cross-contamination culprit is the use of a shared fryer with wheat and gluten-free foods. So a study by Thompson et al. In 2021 assessed the gluten levels of gluten-free fries from gluten-containing ingredients cooked in shared fryers with wheat. And as per our expectations, the study found that gluten cross-contact may occur when gluten-free foods are cooked in shared fryers with wheat. And finally, let's look at consuming gluten-free food in a kitchen that uses wheat flour. Now, let's be honest, if you're up for this, you're probably more on the relaxed side of things when it comes to eating out. But let's have a look at the evidence. So a study by Miller et al. In 2016 aimed to determine the variables that have a significant effect on gluten contamination in commercial kitchens when wheat flour is in use, and they also wanted to establish some controls necessary to assure gluten-free production. So the study showed that the established control of a minimum of 2 meter distance, along with good hygiene practices, was found to be effective in preparing gluten-free meals at all 5 study sites. So great to know as well. So hopefully from the evidence I have presented you, you can see where potential risk lies when eating out. To put your mind at ease when eating out, here's the things you want to remember if relevant to the meal you are considering. So you need to ask for gluten-free pasta to be prepared in a fresh boiling water in a cleaned pot. Consider your own personal level of sensitivity when it comes to toasting your gluten-free bread. Sorry. If you are sensitive, you may wish to toast your bread on a clean grill or fry pan with your bread wrapped in baking paper if no dedicated gluten-free toaster is available. Request that your gluten-free cake be handled with separate utensils. Request that all utensils are used to prepare your gluten-free meal and clean and not shared with gluten-containing food. Ask your food to be prepared in a dedicated gluten-free fryer if available, or prepare in a different way that is celiac safe, for example, fried in a clean fry pan or baked on the top rack of an oven. Consider your own level of personal risk when it comes to consuming food from a kitchen that also handles wheat flour. If possible, request for your gluten-free meal to be prepared at least 2 meters away from the wheat flour with good hygiene practices. Remember, if you're not getting a good vibe from the place in terms of the seriousness they are taking to prepare your gluten-free meal, choose somewhere else to eat. Okay, so the next part of my presentation looks at the skills you need to master eating out safely. You've got the evidence behind you now, so now the fun begins. So here's my 5 tips for finding a celiac safe place. Tip number 1, do your research. Find out if a restaurant or food provider cater for people requiring a gluten-free diet by either looking up the menu online or giving them a call. Note, do not immediately dismiss places that use a disclaimer such as, whilst all care is taken, we cannot guarantee 100% gluten-free meals. Consider this. You probably eat gluten-free food prepared in your own kitchen alongside gluten-containing food. This is 100% fine if you do it safely. Therefore, it is possible to eat at a restaurant that prepares gluten-containing food. Finding a place that you can trust to provide you a celiac safe meal might require seeing a little bit more than a gluten-free symbol on their menu. You might like to get reviews from your celiac community to find out places they recommend in your area. Start with your local celiac support group or even search the Find Me Gluten-Free app for celiac-friendly or dedicated gluten-free places to eat near you. And opt for a more celiac-friendly cuisine, such as Mexican, Vietnamese, Indian, or Thai. But just remember to ask those important questions when it comes to any potential gluten getting into your meal. Tip number 2, contact the food provider ahead of time during a non-busy time outside of meal times. Be upfront from the start about your celiac disease. You need to say something along the lines of, I'm thinking about dining with you on Friday night, but I have celiac disease, which means I am medically required to follow a strict gluten-free diet. Is it possible to discuss some gluten-free meal options with you? No, you may find that wait staff might not be 100% aware of how the meals are prepared, and therefore you might find more trust in speaking directly to the chef who will be preparing your meal. Be confident in discussing your dietary needs and explaining that you need your meal to be prepared in a celiac safe way. Depending on the meal you are considering ordering, you may like to mention certain preparation methods as highlighted in the evidence above. Don't feel like you are giving them too many instructions, as you don't want to be sitting at the table second guessing what you are eating, instead of enjoying your time out with friends or family. Generally, you want to ensure that all ingredients used are gluten-free, the food preparation method is celiac safe, and clean utensils are used in every step of the process to minimize the risk of cross-contact. You may also want to reiterate that any sauces or condiments that can possibly contain gluten be left off your meal. So tip 3, when it comes to ordering your gluten-free meal on the night, make sure the waitstaff are aware of your previous discussions with the chef or other waitstaff member. Hopefully a refresher is not needed, but be prepared to go over everything you did in the lead up to your visit to ensure everyone is on board with your dietary needs. If a big group of you are going out for dinner, you may like to ask everyone else to order ahead of you so that no one is held up waiting for you, and so you are also top of mind as soon as your order is delivered to the kitchen. Tip 4, get your friends and family on board too. Generally, friends and family have your best interests at heart and want to make sure there is something you can eat when you get together. Get them to be your biggest advocates. They will hopefully be able to choose a place to eat that can cater for your dietary needs, and they can ask some questions for you as well. You will feel pretty special when all the work is done for you. And finally, tip number 5, thank the place you ate out at for providing you with a celiac safe meal, and share this place with other members of the celiac community so that more of us can have a great eating experience. So where are you now? I hope that you are feeling a little bit more confident to eat out with a better understanding of how much gluten is safe, the research behind the real risk of cross-contact, and with some strategies to help you master eating out safely and without worry. Are you still unsure or anxious about eating out? Well, perhaps it's time to get in touch with an expert celiac dietitian. An expert celiac dietitian can help you navigate a new diagnosis of celiac disease by educating and empowering you to make gluten-free food choices that you enjoy, whilst restoring your gut health. They can also help with ongoing gut issues or uncertainty around the gluten-free diet, and help you decide whether a gluten enzyme supplement may be for you. Now, this is another topic in itself, but please feel free to contact me if you would like more information on this. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you to help you on your celiac journey. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so via Instagram. My handle is @celiac.dietitian.jess. You can either DM me or tap the link in bio to book a free discovery call to see how we can work together. Or alternatively, send me an email and let me know how I can help you with your celiac disease. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.